Marco Rubio has been clear that he supports no exceptions, even in the cases of rape and incest. He said it time and time and time again. But what I can say to him, and I can say to Florida, we are not going back, Senator, no matter how obsessed you are with the woman's body and her right to choose. We are not going back to a time where women are treated like second-class citizens or like property. My mother, the maid and a janitor, worked long, hard days. But I can never remember a time they did not vote. If our car wasn't working, they would pay somebody a couple of dollars to take them to the polls. Why on earth would we try to stop them from voting? They were able to vote because of our democracy, the wonderful system of government that we have. No, it is not perfect. But our system of government is what allows us to be here tonight. We have to do everything within our power to uphold the Constitution, protect the rule of law, and protect our democracy, and protect each person's Republican, Democrats, and independents right to vote. That's what I did as a police officer and a police chief. I took an oath that I would protect and serve, defend the Constitution, not just for people who looked like me or the richest of the rich, but for all people.
All right.
He's been in elected office since 1998, and insurance in Florida has tripled, and people are suffering. I sent a letter to Governor DeSantis saying, yes, I know it's a state issue, but how can we work together to lower the cost of property insurance for Floridians? Because people are suffering. We got to prepare for the next hurricane. Are we going to wait and do nothing? I asked him to call a special legislative session to talk solely about this issue. We have got to get the property insurance
Senator
down.
Rubio, I want to give you 30 seconds to rebut.
Well, first of all, when I was in the state legislature, if we want to go back to that, we actually had a special session. But we certainly supported it, and we certainly made it happen. So that's number one. Number two, I would say that, trust me when I tell you guys, trust me when I tell you, a federal government that struggles to deliver the mail in a regular and consistent basis in parts of this country, you don't want them in charge of your property insurance. Look, do I care about the issue? Yeah, I care about the issue. I'm about to pay $9,000 a year more for property insurance.
That's the 30 seconds. Thank you, Senator. We're going to move on to the next question. That shooter and the killer who took 8 lives at an Indiana FedEx facility last year were both 19 years old when they killed. The killers in this year's mass shootings in Buffalo and Uvalde, Texas, were both 18. All used legally purchased AR-style rifles. In the nationally televised CNN town hall 3 days after the Parkland massacre, you said, quote, if you are 18 years of age, you should not be able to buy a rifle. I will support a law that takes that right away. Would you still support that federal law?
No, let me tell you why that law doesn't work and why that proposal doesn't work. We had a shooter last Thursday, tragic, in North Carolina. He was 15. Where did he get the gun? He didn't get it from a gun show. He certainly didn't buy it. He's 15 years of age. We've had shootings in the state. Pulse was a terrorist attack. A licensed security guard with a permit to carry firearms, extensive background check. So I think the solution to this problem is to identify these people that are acting this way and stop them before they act.
I want to stop you here, Senator, but before I go to Congresswoman Demings, I want to make sure that I understand that what you said in 2018 is not what you believe is the solution today.
I do not believe
there should not be a ban on 18 or 19 or 20-year-olds
buying a 15-year-old just got a gun, got a shotgun.
But that's one case. I just want to make sure.
No, it's more than one case. But one in Connecticut also involved the exact same thing.
We could do this all night, but I want to make sure that you don't support that anymore. It is an important point.
Denying the right to buy it is not going to keep them from doing it. Here's the fundamental issue. The fundamental issue is, why are these kids, why are these people going out there and massacring people?
This is the same argument.
Because a lot of people own AR-15s and they don't kill everyone.
I understand, sir, but I want to go to Congresswoman Demings for 60 seconds.
You know, people who are the families of victims of gun violence just heard that, and they're asking themselves, what in the hell did he just say? Senator, you used the Pulse nightclub shooting as your inspiration to run again for the Senate in 2016. Pulse is in my district. And yet, you've done nothing to help address gun violence and get dangerous weapons out of the hands of dangerous people. Florida, after Parkland, after you made promises that you had no intentions on keeping to the parents of Parkland, Florida passed legislation raising the age to have an assault weapon, pass red flag laws that we've seen 7,000 plus instances where they've been used now. Our primary responsibility is the safety of Floridians. And Senator, 24 years in elected office, and you have not yet risen to that occasion. And then when asked about it, you say something that makes no sense.
All right, Congresswoman, thank you. Senator, 30-second rebuttal from you.
Yeah, what makes no sense is that we're going to actually pass laws that only law-abiding people will follow and criminals will continue to violate. The truth of the matter is, at the end of the day, that Americans have a Second Amendment right to protect themselves. They have, and these killers that are out there, if they're intent on killing, as they are, they have found multiple ways to get a hold of weapons and cause mass destruction. Just the other day, he used a shotgun, which wouldn't have been covered by any of these restrictions. I have a bipartisan red flag law sponsored with Senator Jack Reed. But the problem is that the leftists in the Senate and in the House, like Congresswoman Demings, are against it because they want the California red flag law that allows your coworker has a grudge against you and can go to a judge and take away your guns. That I'll never support.
That's the 30. I'm going to overlook Senator-elect Demings. We're going to just blow by that.
I said Senator and then I said
Congresswoman Demings.
Yeah, thank you. Look, every time we talk about responsible gun ownership and legislation that could help protect lives, you pull the Second Amendment out. My father was a gun owner. It has nothing to do with the Second Amendment. This is about taking dangerous guns out of the hands of dangerous people. And the overwhelming majority of people in our nation want us to do just that. How long will you watch people being gunned down in first grade, fourth grade, high school, college, church, synagogue, a grocery store, a movie theater, a mall, and a nightclub,
Congresswoman,
and do nothing?
That is time.
And that's why she says we did nothing. That's not accurate. The truth, today, you go to the Department of Homeland Security website, and there's a clearinghouse. She's going to mock it. She shouldn't, because the idea came from a Parkland father. And there's a clearinghouse there that basically tells schools, for example, this is what works for safety and this is what doesn't. And we got that put in there. You know who's trying to take that down? The Biden administration. Because they say that to have a school safety clearinghouse is discriminatory against minority students.
30 more seconds,
Clearinghouse
Congresswoman.
is fine. But Senator Rubio thought that he could reduce this very critical issue to supporting a clearinghouse on the Homeland Security website. And he thought he would get a pass for the mass shootings that we've had in our state and doing nothing significant to do anything about it. Your primary responsibility, Senator, is to protect the safety of the people that you represent.
We just passed the bill they wanted, and there was a shooting a week later, and the week after that.
Why don't we just stop arresting murderers?
The only people that follow these laws are law-abiding.
Specifically, what solutions do you have for solving the crisis at our southern border?
We are a nation of laws. I've enforced them for 27 years. Despite what the senator wants you to believe, he's living in fantasy land. I've enforced them. And we need to make sure that the men and women at the borders have the resources that they need. I am a fan of boots on the ground. Let's have more boots on the ground, but let's also hire more processors so that we can separate those who need to be arrested from those who are seeking asylum. We're a nation of laws, but we have to enforce the law, but we also obey the law that says people who are in trouble can seek asylum in this country. And so more boots on the ground, more technology, more processors. Let's secure our border. The senator likes to talk about open borders. It's almost an insult to the men and women who are there securing the border. But let's get more agents to help at the border. We can do this.
If I may respond to that. Number one, the only one who's insulted the people working the border are Joe Biden and Democrats who accuse them of whipping Haitian migrants, and that turned out not to be true. So we can push people through instead of 1 day to 3 day detention,
Let me stop
no day
you there,
detention.
Senator,
This can't continue. We have to stop
Let's
this.
ask the Congresswoman to respond to that. You have 30 seconds, Congresswoman.
If we have more processors and they don't meet the standard for asylum seekers, you send them back. Yes, we need to secure our border more. I think we can do that with technology, more boots on the ground, and more people to process those who need to be turned back, those who are breaking the law, from those who are asylum seekers. Senator, enforce the law, but also obey the law as well.
Which boots does she want on the ground? She was against National Guard deployment. They demonized the Border Patrol. And they talk about processors.
Who are
and
you talking about, Senator?
Well, your party.
Who demonized the...
You have, and your party has,
That's
Congresswoman.
a lie.
Absolutely true. And let me tell you something else that they've done. Here's the other thing they've done. They talk about more processors.
Would you be willing to do anything to win, Senator?
They talk about more processors. Okay, so people, everybody, the Biden administration,
you're
all you have to
making
do
it
is
up.
say the magic word.
You're making it up. Stop.
This
No,
is devolved. I want to move on to the next issue here,
traffickers give you the magic words. You're saying they let you in.
Congresswoman, I am forced to move on at this time.
How gullible do you think people are?
The next question is going to come from Vicki Sessionary from Florida Trends Magazine. Vicki?
Representative Demings, last year you backed legislation that increased Social Security benefits and would require high-wage earners to pay more in Social Security taxes. Why should Congress raise taxes to pay for a broken system?
Well, number one, we have to think about what the promise of Social Security was. It was to keep our seniors out of poverty. And you know, being in elected office and the critical position of being a United States Senator, it is about making choices to protect people. I believe that we've got to do everything within our power to protect those who have had to go to work every day and deserve to be able to retire with dignity and respect. Governing is about priorities, and Social Security and protecting it is a priority for me. I'm not going to sacrifice it, and we need to do what we need to do, whatever that is, to protect it. We can do that.
Follow-up question for Senator Rubio. Florida's junior Senator Rick Scott proposed 11-point plan to rescue America requires, quote, all federal legislation to sunset in 5 years. If a law is worth keeping, Congress can pass it again, Senator Scott says. That includes Medicare, Social Security, and VA benefits. Do you support putting these federal entitlements on a chopping block every 5 years?
No, and that's not my plan. That's Senator Scott. He's doing a great job. He's not very shy. You should ask him. He's more than happy to talk to you about his plan. I can tell you, on the other hand, if you want to talk about radical plans, Congresswoman Demings supported a radical plan. She actually voted for the crazy people's budget, a socialist budget. She voted for it. I don't even know if she remembers she voted for it.
I hadn't seen the socialist budget.
Well, you voted for the people's budget, and it's a socialist budget. Trust me when I tell you that any budget that zeroes out the war on terror, takes $1 trillion out of the Pentagon, okay, raises taxes by $8 trillion on working Americans, is a socialist budget. And she didn't just have her name on it, she voted for it.
That's your time. Congresswoman Demings, 30 seconds to you.
Senator, you're repeating yourself again. We've seen this show before. Socialists, crazy, Marxist, silly.
But which one
that must be on your list for your talking points. The bottom line is you said that Rick Scott's plan, it's good to have good ideas. You did not say that you did not support it. I hear you saying that tonight, but when you were first asked about his plan, you said, I think it's good to have good ideas. You remember that?
A $10.25 tax on a barrel of oil so that your prices go up by 35 cents? I don't know what word you prefer, socialist, Marxist, crazy. I don't know. I'm open to suggestions about how we describe such a nutty idea.
Senator,
that
that's
destroy
your
the country.
time. Congresswoman Demings.
He's talking about the barrel of oil again.
Senator, everyone's talking about the barrel of oil these days.
Look, you've been in elected office in Florida for 24 years, and what we have been left with is skyrocketing property insurance, lack of affordable housing, health care, gone through the roof. We haven't expanded Medicaid. People are hurting. And you know what, Senator, when I talk to your voters around the state, you know what they say? They don't know what you stand for.
President Biden says the world is closer to nuclear Armageddon than at any time since the Cuban Missile Crisis exactly 60 years ago this month. 3 times in the last week, Vladimir Putin has ordered Russian missile attacks on Ukrainian cities, targeting and killing civilians. If Russia next fires a limited-range tactical nuclear device at Ukraine, or strikes a NATO ally like Poland, even with a conventional weapon, what's the correct response by the Biden White House and NATO?
Well, we have to hold those who are not our friends accountable. And Senator, that does include Russia. It's not just China. Russia has attacked our friend Ukraine, what they thought was going to be over in a few days, as you know, has been going on for almost a year. We have to continue to support Ukraine and our NATO allies. Of course, we've got to hold Russia accountable. We always use diplomacy around the NATO table. We cannot afford to have a nuclear attack. And the United States has to do everything in its power to prevent that from happening.
I'm not sure the president had to do it over again. He would choose the words Armageddon or Cuban Missile Crisis. But there's no doubt about this. Vladimir Putin is losing this war. And if he loses the war, he'll lose his position. And, you know, I don't think the retirement plan for former Russian dictator presidents is a very good one. So I think he's very concerned about that. So I do think we have to be very wary, and I've warned about this from the beginning, about what he might do to escalate. One is the use of a tactical weapon, which is not a strategic weapon. We're not talking about him launching a missile against Chicago or New York, but we are talking about the use of artillery shells and short-range missiles in the battlefield, which would be unprecedented. And I think the response to that has to be a unified response that perhaps takes out what it is that launched those and where those were launched from. I think the likelier scenario, and the one that really is concerning, is that he would attack, for example, an airport in Poland. At that point, NATO would have to come together and decide whether they're going to invoke Article 5, and the United States needs to live up to its NATO commitments.
Let me ask the Congresswoman, to that point, the NATO response, we know what the NATO charter says. Poland's attacked, as the senator's scenario says, perhaps the airport. What is the response from the United States as well as NATO?
We have to do everything within our power to protect our NATO allies. Everything within our power. If Poland is attacked, then there has to be an immediate response. And I believe between our military and the Department of Defense and our experts and our intelligence community, based on the intelligence on the ground, I believe that that response will be sufficient and swift, but we've got to leave it in the hands of the people who are there and the people who are involved in this every day, with the ultimate goal of keeping America safe and keeping our allies, our NATO friends, safe.
All right, Senator, I have 30 more seconds.
Well, just to add, I think the response needs to be proportional. And what I mean by that is that the NATO alliance will have to meet, and this can't be unilateral. The NATO alliance will have to meet and decide what is a proportional response, and that would depend on the nature and level of the attack. But it has to be an allied response, not simply a U.S. one. That's what's most critical here. It's not anything at our disposal.
Congresswoman Demings, Senator Rubio has called Democrats' attempts to pass a new federal voting rights law an effort to, quote, ram through an election law to make sure you never lose power, to make it easier for Democrats to win. Why are new federal protections of voting rights needed?
Well, let me say this. I'm not the person standing on the stage who supports suppressing the right to vote. Look, I can think about the words of my friend and former colleague, John Lewis, who said the right to vote is precious, that is almost sacred. And the senator thinks that we should leave that up to the states. Well, we tried that with voting rights, and we know the bad actors who did some ungodly things to stop people from voting. So we should not just protect the right for a few people or the privileged few, we should protect voting rights for everyone. And we need a federal law to keep everybody accountable. The John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act is sitting in the Senate right now, waiting for a vote. The Freedom to Vote Act, which will help protect the right to vote for all people, is sitting in the Senate right now, waiting for a vote. That is our duty and responsibility, to allow the people to vote.
That's time. Rick, I know you have another question.
This question is for you, Senator Rubio. In January, you wrote in The Federalist that Democrats' push for voting rights is about, again, quote, exaggerated problems and imaginary fears, unquote. Can you give us specifics on what you mean by that?
Sure. It's never been easier to vote.
I'm sorry?
It's never been easier to vote. It's never been easier to vote. In Florida, you can now vote by mail for any reason. You can vote, for example, 10 days before the election. You can vote on Election Day. In Georgia, which they claim to be the place that was suppressing all the votes, you had record African-American voter turnout. To compare what's happening now to the Jim Crow era, where people were literally murdered, where people were forced to take poll taxes and pay poll taxes and literacy tests, we don't need that federal law imposed on every state. Florida has very good election laws, and other states have very good election laws, and the states that don't have very good election laws are the states that actually have gone in the opposite direction of weakening security for the ballot.
All right, Senator, thank you. Congressman, I want to go back to you for 60 seconds.
Florida has an election law police force. And if the laws are so wonderful, what's the need for that? Florida also eliminated the number of drop boxes from 2020. Why do that, particularly in certain areas, Senator? Your job is to make sure that every person votes. The ones who may vote for you and the ones who may not vote for you. That is your responsibility. So if it's so perfect, why the adjustments? We need to hold states accountable to make sure every person, although that scares the senator to death, has the right, the precious right, to cast their vote.
Senator.
Yeah. I'm trying to suppress the vote, and I'm wasting a lot of money telling people to go out and vote. That's a method of voting that doesn't advantage one group or another. There's danger involved in drop boxes. People need to think about it. Okay, imagine if someone decides, oh, there's a drop box. I'm just going to put some explosive in it and blow it up and burn all of those ballots, and now those votes don't count at all.
That's nonsense.
Okay.
That we want a federal takeover. We passed the Voting Rights Advancement Act in the House of Representatives because of the unbelievable voter suppression efforts that were going on by the senator and his party.
Well, which voter
Let
suppression vote is that?
people vote. That's nonsense, what he just said. We want every person to vote. And Senator, we've been busy too, encouraging people to vote. It doesn't threaten me. It doesn't scare me to let the people vote.
And that's time. I want to move on to another issue. The Biden National Security Plan identifies Russia as an imminent danger and China as the greatest long-term threat. What should U.S. policy be with China moving forward from here?
We've got to hold China accountable. We've got to hold them accountable for the violations of our intellectual property. We've got to hold them accountable for, look, the bottom line is the United States is the world power. We're the most powerful nation in the world. We know that China has not been the best player, the best actor, and we have to hold them accountable. What President Xi said about possibly taking Taiwan by force, that is totally against our principles and our values, and we have to take action if there's any serious effort to do that. Look, I serve on the Intelligence Committee as well as the senator does. That is something that we have been monitoring just about every day. If China makes any aggressive actions, deliberate actions to take Taiwan, then there has to be a response from the United States.
So much so that China has actually sanctioned and banned me. And I was very upset about that because I had to cancel my vacation in Wuhan.
The bottom line is we have to hold China.
I'd ask the audience to please respect the candidates' statements.
The bottom line is we have to hold China accountable. And your question involved their takeover of Taiwan. We have to make sure that that does not happen. And as a member of the Intelligence Committee, that is an issue that we are studying every day to make sure that does not happen. Look, the senator can play national security expert all he wants. I know he needs that for his next presidential run.
And the only thing she does is vote 100% with Pelosi. The vote is clear, and I'm asking voters for their support. Thank you.
Right on time, Senator. Congresswoman Demings.
Todd, I wasn't going to start my closing arguments with the last couple of things the senator said were just not true. And let me say this. I stand on this stage tonight as a daughter, the daughter of a maid and a janitor. Had the awesome honor of being the first in my family to graduate college, served at the police department, worked my way up through the ranks to become the chief of police, serving in the House and now running for the Senate. Only in America is my story possible. I just happen to believe that every person, regardless of who they are, deserves the opportunity to succeed, deserves the opportunity to make it. The senator will pick and choose winners and losers based on their ability to pay to play. He talked about pharmaceuticals. He voted against legislation that would help reduce the cost of prescription drugs and help cap the cost of insulin.
That is time. Senator, Congressman, thank you both so much for participating in this. We want to thank our audience.